when I went back to college after learning sign language as an elderly man. My professors told me, be aware, Mac, that you're in school with millennials. So they don't have the reflexive memory knowledge that you do that goes back to World War II because of my distinguished old man. So I would like to put into perspective my opinion about the situation that we now face that's in the news about nuclear exchanges. The only responsible view that has been expressed has so far been by French President Macron, who said, there's no way we're going to use any nukes. Now, the lesson of World War II has largely been misused since. The lesson of World War II was established that when faced with the prospect of might lying through the teeth, believing that might makes right, you don't make yourself more vulnerable. In other words, never believe a tyrant when he promises that he won't invade you. Now, I was willing to extend Vladimir Putin the view that responsible civics behavior by statesmen in Europe, even those being accused of being dictators, was possible. That one of the lessons we learned from World War II is that Russia isn't Germany. And I said he's probably massing troops at the border as a scare tactic because he wants to call attention to the European expansion of NATO. Now, I was wrong. Biden was right, and I think it's important always to keep in mind that I was wrong about that, and Joe Biden was right. Putin invaded. He says it's a special military operation. I also believe that that may be true. That he may have just wanted to consolidate the Russian Federation to protect the Russian majority in eastern Ukraine. And I still believe that may be true. And the World War II lesson of Dodge is that um, there's no way that you can believe him. If you don't fight him now, you'll have to fight him later. Well, Ukraine clearly believes that. What I wonder is have they considered for a moment that standing down on this pretzel would facilitate the reopening of dialogue with China, with Russia on climate change and avoid a nuclear war? They're playing the lesson of World War II loud and clear to the threat of nuclear holocaust. So I want children to understand that the reason the situation developed is because of the famous Zacks of Dr. Zeus who come face to face and just stand there refusing ever to compromise, refusing to engage in what is known as the golden mean of Aristotle. Under the rules of Adolf Hitler, any attempt to negotiate a settlement is capitulation. And the argument being made is nobody can prevent Putin from his judo mentality as a dictator. He's going after a prize win. Well, the prize that his eyes are on appear to be protecting the Russian people of eastern Ukraine and getting that territory gobbled. And it's not clear that it ever extended beyond that. He has not engaged in ferocious tactics, just ferocious threats. And it's clear what they want is third party negotiations to stop the nuclear war before it begins. And what that would mean would be that anybody who buys, I'm just explaining this now, to children, teenagers, whatever, anybody who, this is textbook political history logic. What anybody who believes that we should stand down, ceasefire, and agree to negotiate for a hardly contested settlement in eastern Ukraine, which is our prerogative. We're not actually Ukrainians under the rule of the Ukrainian government. We're entitled to consider these issues. But what anybody who believes that we should negotiate a settlement is faced with is a megatonnage of Western think tank World War II logic. If you give them an inch, you are capitulating to fascism, to nuclear blackmail. They'll just encourage them. They'll do it again. And it's like the move situation in Philadelphia was like this. The move was locked into, it was a tribal group who locked into a building and refused to leave until Mayor Good ended up igniting a firebomb that destroyed blocks and blocks of houses. And I guarantee you, if this situation leads to nuclear conflict, Biden will go down in history not as Winston Churchill, but as Mayor Good. However, I think it's important to remember that Mayor Good did try to negotiate. So before George Monbiot jumps and hollers at me about being soft on Putin, like everybody else, I've watched the films. I understand his personality. I understand his dignities are real enough. He takes himself seriously, but he's persecuted people like me badly enough that I understand I count for nothing in his book. I understand all of that. But before you jump and holler at me about being soft on Putin and all of this stuff, I think you should bear in mind that the stakes are incredibly high, but there's no guarantee that he's not leading us headlong into the abyss by hell or high water because he has some sort of um, mystical proclivity to do that for some reason. I don't understand why he would be doing this in the first place. So the bottom line is I don't understand. I never understood. I heard John Towers calling Russia ever more menacing when they took down the Berlin Wall. I didn't understand that. I don't understand either side. So the play-by-play story that Vladimir Putin is play-by-playing has elements of truth, in my opinion. When I lived in Montana, John Towers had no business saying anything but singing the praises of Russia for taking down the Berlin Wall. No business. It was crackpot right wing warmongering extremism from people who've been all cranked up with Reaganism for years and years and years in the Democratic Party unions. I mean, they tortured me. I have lived from cradle to grave torture. Now, the person who justified what was done to me and pulled the plug on any hope of any kind of like peer rescue was named Chris Durgan, which is a synthesis of the Sinfield variety of Dugan and Gurgen. So in Diagnosis Cahoots, you have to understand that under the hood of Hollywood, I'm looking at Sergei Eisenstein. I'm looking for the understanding for libraries, if we pull through, of how Hollywood went about doing this. And I will yield on one point. Thank you, Camilla, for your tip of the fourth way. I really do thank you. I have to thank you because you've rescued human history by making it clear what was going on. I don't know if she was told to do that by the Russian authorities or or she did it on her own reconnaissance, or whether it was from the British Empire's cahooterings that they wanted it to be brought to the surface, what this deluge plan has been from World War One. But let's knock it off. I mean, children are at stake. The future is at stake. We've lost 70% of our wildlife. I'm not the sort of person who dislikes being in a poor environment with a lot of Chinese people. I lived in Chinatown for 10 years. My best friend is a Korean orphan who's deaf and has Down syndrome. I love her like you, you love the person you love most as a friend in the whole world. She's a treasure chest of Charles Dickens' poverty charms. We don't need this. So if if we're going to be Zacks, I think you need to look at two things in conclusion. One is that Mayor Good tried and failed to negotiate, and when things just burned down, he was completely blamed for it. Biden hasn't even tried to negotiate. And if he negotiates and things fall apart, he's going to be in bad shape. So we have to do our level best to make sure that the lines of understanding and communication are open. So what I suggest is that the White House talk to Vlad Zelensky, and the two of them from the United Nations ask patiently and sincerely, Mr. Putin, which third parties do you propose to negotiate through?